There are 200 people in this room tonight, and only one of them knows I am singing about her. Her hand is on the decree. Steady. The kind of steady that means she has eaten somewhere I was not invited to know about. I am in bells and paint. I have been performing for an hour. The court laughs the way it always laughs at me, which is to say, it does not listen. That is what bells are for. They tell a room not to listen too closely to the man wearing them. But tonight, I am not performing for the court. I start a foreign song, slow, sweet, sad. The nobles think it is charming. They lean back in their chairs and let it pass over them like wine. They do not know it is the song I used to sing when the queen was starving in her chambers, and I let her feast on me and embrace me. Her hand stops at the first verse. Then it moves again. She looks at me the way someone looks at furniture that has started to creak, cold, disinterested, already finished with me before I open my mouth. My thumb finds the notch under the wooden bird in my pocket. She knows, and she will not give me the mercy of looking away. Chapter 1. The kitchen. Months earlier, before dawn. I sat on the flour sack with one bell in each hand. The bells came off my shoes one by one, slow as confession, and I lined them on the wood beside me until there were 8 in a row. The cook was kneading bread. She did not look up. She had not looked up for years. She had a particular not looking, the cook, the kind that lets a man take his bells off in peace and feel less alone for it. The queen had not eaten in 9 days, not human blood, not animal, nothing. The tray went up at sundown and came down at midnight, and at midnight a guard carried it through the kitchen, full and untouched, and the kitchen went quiet the way a room goes quiet when someone you love is dying upstairs. The cook salted the dough. I put the bells back in my pocket. Then Captain Rowan came in. I knew him by the boots. Rowan walked like a man who had been told not to make noise and never quite forgiven the order. He stopped in front of me.
You haven't been called.
No, no one has. I know.
He stood there. He had a face like winter, not unkind, just tired of weather. He had been her father's man before he was hers. He had been at the castle the night they brought her back from the cellar. He had been there when they brought me back too.
She's dying, Wren.
I did not say anything.
She used to laugh when you sang the foreign one, the one she did not know the words to. She doesn't laugh anymore. I am asking, not the queen.
That was the line that did it. I'd held against the queen for years. I had not learned how to hold against Rowan. I sat with the bells in my hand, and a memory I had not invited came in through the open door. A torn dress, a dead maid, a boy holding his breath, the king's voice, dry as paper.
Take him out.
And then her voice, smaller.
No.
A long silence in this corridor while 2 men argued about what to do with a witness. And then the compromise that is not mercy.
Break his legs. Make him useful. Make him silent.
The court physician had instructions. I learned that later. Legs do not heal at random angles. A man does not walk like this by accident. The other thing I remembered, while I sat on the flour sack with Rowan waiting, was older than that, older than the cellar. The men who had taken me from my mother had spoken a language I have not heard now in 26 years. The king's men killed those men. The king put me on a horse. It is a strange thing, owing your life and your ruin to the same family. Rowan waited. I took the bells out of my pocket. Taken them off 700 nights. I put them back on. Chapter 2. Her chambers had not changed. Heavy curtains drawn. A cold hearth. The writing desk against the east wall, and on it, his reading glasses, the gold-rimmed ones he wore at supper. They had not moved in 2 years. The cup beside them was the cup he used for evening wine. The chair was pulled back the way a man pulls a chair back when he means to come back to it in a moment. She lay facing the wall. I sat in the chair by the bed, not his chair, the small one, the servant's chair, and I sang. I sang the foreign one because Rowan had said it. I sang it slow because she could not bear quick sounds anymore. I sang it through twice and she did not turn. I counted her breaths, 7 a minute. That was the number on the first night. It dropped to 6, then to 5. I learned to listen for them through the rustle of the curtain. I learned the silences between, which were almost long enough to put a child to sleep in. I came every night. The cook left me bread on the way up and did not ask. I want to tell you, Tomas, but I do not know how to tell you, Tomas, without bending him out of shape. He had been a duke's son. His body had never matched his mind. His hands shook on bad days, and on good days he carved. He carved the bird on a good day. I was in the doorway. I was waiting to be dismissed. He was at the writing desk with a small block of pine wood and a knife that was finer than the wood deserved. He did not look up at me, but he knew I was there. Tomas always knew when I was there. When the bird was done, he set it down on the desk and turned it once with one finger.
For the woman who calls herself a hawk.
She was at the window. She did not turn around.
A hawk is not a songbird. That is not me.
He did not answer. He picked the bird up and weighed it in his palm. Then he turned and held it out to me.
Then you take it.
I did not move. He waited. He waited the way he waited for everything, as if the world owed him no particular speed. I took it. His thumb stayed on the carving a moment after my hand closed. He had wanted me to feel the weight before he let go. That was the only thing he ever gave me. There was a long gallery on the south side of the keep with windows the height of a man, and once Tomas walked the whole length of it beside me and did not slow on purpose, only walked the speed he walked, which happened to be mine that day. I do not think he knew. I never said. There is no good place to say a thing like that. I sang to her on the 13th night. She turned. She crossed the room faster than I could rise. I had time to see her face, and her face was not a face, it was hunger wearing one. And then her mouth was at my wrist, and the room went very small. She drank. Not enough to kill me, enough to take the standing out of me. I went down on the rug, and the rug smelled of cedar, and I heard her breath catch above me, the way a person catches their breath when they have just remembered something terrible. That was all. She stepped back. She looked at her own hands like they had betrayed her. Then she looked at me, and what was in her face was not love. I did not have a word for it then. I do not have one now.
Get out.
I got out. By morning, the order had gone through the household. No one was to enter the Queen's chambers. Not Rowan, not the head physician, not the cook, not the jester. I went down to the kitchen at dawn with my sleeve pulled over the bandage at my wrist. The cook saw it. She handed me bread. I ate it standing. Chapter 3. For 4 days, nothing. The household held its breath. The trays went up. The trays came down full. The wrist healed wrong, and I learned to keep it in my sleeve. The cook left an extra slice on the side of the breadboard. I did not ask why, and she did not say. Then they found the first body, inside the city walls, near the river gate, drained. They told the council it was an animal attack, and the council nodded the way a council nods when it has already decided to disbelieve the next thing it will be told. I went to look. I'm not a guard. I'm not anything official, but a jester goes places a guard does not, because no one stops a man in bells. I stood at the edge of the courtyard while the body was laid out, and I looked at the wound at her throat. It was not a hunger wound. A starving thing tears. A starving thing is not particular. This wound was particular. The puncture was clean and the angle was wrong. There was a small cut beside it where a blade had opened the vein further to make the drain easier. I'd seen this once before when I was 9, in the back of a cart that smelled of straw and sweat. The men who had taken me from my mother had done this to a woman they could not sell. They had done it neatly. They had been trained. This was Sarnath work. I went back to the kitchen and sat down and did not say anything to the cook. The cook did not ask. The second body came 3 days after that. Lord Vale stood up in council that morning before the second body was even cool, which is how I knew. He invoked the old law. The sovereign's body is the kingdom's body, and when there is reason to suspect the sovereign has fed upon her people, the council holds the right of examination. 200 years old. Written when there was a monster on the throne and the country needed a way to put a knife to her without calling it a knife. He had been preparing the speech. You could hear it in the cadence. The Sarnath ships were in the harbor by then. 3 of them, flying the wrong flag. No one was fooled. The girl in the courtyard was Eva. She was 9. She had hair the color of wet straw and a front tooth that came in crooked. She used to wait outside the kitchen at noon for me to come down between performances, and I would do the card trick with the Queen of Cups, and she would say again, and I would do it again. I did it again, maybe 40 times in her short life. They had laid her on the courtyard stones before they covered her. I saw her face before they covered her. I did not cry. I went back inside. I went down through the servants' passage. I went into the small storeroom off the kitchen and shut the door behind me. I sat on the floor with my back to the wall, and I put my hands over my mouth, and I did not make a sound. Then I came out, and I went to the cook, and I asked her one question.
How long since the queen named the boy?
The cook had her hands in flour. She did not stop kneading.
2 days.
I sat down on the flour sack. She had adopted Louis. She had named Tomas's 6-year-old nephew her heir. The court would call it grief. The court would call it tenderness for the boy. The court would call it anything except what it was. She was preparing the kingdom to survive without her. She was going to die. She would let Vale have his examination. She would let it find what it would find. She would let Sarnath have its small victory at her body. The kingdom would keep its laws. The boy would have a throne. The country my father had made would survive its queen, and no one had asked me. I went back to my room and I did not sleep. And at the 8th hour after sundown, I went up through the passage I had known since I was a child of 8. Because some things you do not need to plan. Some things your legs know before your mind does. The passage came out behind the tapestry in her dressing chamber. I came through. I crossed the carpet. I stood beside her bed. She had not moved in 3 days, the cook had said. I pulled the dagger from my boot. I cut my palm. Not deep. Deep enough. I held my hand above her mouth and let it drip. The first drop fell. Nothing. The second. The third. Her eyes opened. She came up out of the bed in one motion, the way an animal comes up, the way a thing that has been holding still for too long comes up, at the only thing it has reason to come up for, and her hand was at my throat before my next breath. She lifted me. My feet found the floor and lost it. The dagger fell. I heard it hit the rug. She was not hungry first. She was furious.
You.
She pressed harder. The room went gray at the edges. I got the words out broken.
You do not get to escape that easily.
Her hand stopped.
I wanted death long before you did.
Her hand stopped harder.
You taught me how to survive without wanting to. So live, Your Majesty. Live and hate me for it.
She held me there for the longest second of my life. Then her free hand went to my coat. Her fingers found my pocket. She pulled out the wooden bird. She had not seen it in 20 years. Her face changed. She looked at the bird. She lowered me to the floor. She took my hand. She lifted my cut palm. And she drank. Not enough to take the standing out of me. Just enough. She let me go. I went out the way I had come. Through the dressing chamber. Through the passage. Through the tapestry. The corridor was empty. The lamps had burned low. I did not know if she would call me again. I went down to my room and sat on the bed without lighting a candle, and I felt the weight of the wooden bird in my pocket where she had returned it. Chapter 4. The next night, she called for me. I came without bells. I had not decided to. I had simply not put them on. I went up the corridor in soft shoes, and my uneven step made a sound the corridor had not heard in months. The small drag of the right foot, the catch of breath I had stopped noticing in myself. She was sitting up. She was wrapped in a robe the color of bruised plum. She had brushed her hair, or someone had. The room had been opened a little, a curtain drawn back, a pane cracked. There was a smell of cold air and old wax. She did not look at me when I came in.
Sit down.
I sat. She held out her hand. I gave her my wrist. She drank. It was, I do not know how to say what it was. It was careful. It was almost formal. It was the way a person handles a thing they have decided not to break. When she was done, she lowered my wrist, and she did not let go of it, and her thumb moved once along the wound. That was the first thing. It was such a small thing. It is the thing I have come back to most. Her thumb. Just that. The way you touch something you are not sure you will ever throw away. I went still. She let go.
Tomorrow.
I nodded. I went out. Tomorrow came. And tomorrow. She learned the sound of my step in the corridor. I learned in the quiet before she said my name. I had not heard my name in her mouth in months. When she finally said it, Ren, it was on the 4th night, low, almost as if she did not mean to. I sat very still in the dark and did not answer because I did not trust my voice. She said it again, softer.
Ren.
Yes.
She did not say what she had wanted. She drank, and she let go of my wrist, and she did not say anything else. In the corridor on the way down, I had to stop and put my hand against the wall. She kept the Queen's hours by day. I saw her at council from the gallery, signing things, ordering things, refusing veil in a voice that had returned. I saw her in the small garden with Louis, kneeling once to fix the boy's collar. By daylight, she was back. The court whispered that she was recovering. The court did not know what recovering had cost. By night, she was someone else, bare of crown, bare of strategy, bare of the terrible stillness she wore in public. I came to her without bells, every night, for 11 nights. On the 12th, I sang. She had not asked me to. I had brought the bowl of warm water for after, and the cloth for her hands, and I had set them on the small table. And then I had begun the foreign song, very low, almost under my breath, because I could not help it. I had not sung in her chambers since the 13th night, the night she fed. She did not move. I sang the second verse. She answered the line, just the one line, just half of it. Her voice was rough and unused, and she stopped before the line was done, the way a person stops who has caught themselves. I did not finish the song. I did not want to push. I went out. In my small room beside the kitchens, I sat on the bed and I tried to remember what the bells weighed. I could not. I had not put them on in 11 nights. I decided, sitting there in the dark, that I would not put them on again. Chapter 5. I stopped counting the nights by sunrise. I started counting them by where she had touched me. Wrist, palm, the inside of the elbow, once when the wrists were too bruised, the throat. And that was the night the line broke. It was the 18th night, or the 19th. The fire was low. She had not drunk yet. She was sitting on the edge of the bed in her plum robe, and I was beside her, and she had taken my hand and turned it over in her own, and said nothing for a long time. Then she did not lift my wrist. She leaned in. Her mouth was at my throat. She did not bite, not yet. She rested her mouth against my skin the way you rest something fragile against something that might break it, and I felt her breath go in and out, and I understood, slowly, the way a man understands a thing he has wanted too long to recognize, that this was not feeding anymore. This was a question. My hand went to the back of her hair without my permission. She did not move. I felt her teeth, very lightly, against the skin. She was not breaking it. She was asking me whether I would let her. I said her name, hers.
Ileana.
She bit, slowly, almost, and I cannot say this another way, almost lovingly. I did not faint. I did not collapse. I held her against me and she drank, and somewhere between the bite and the after, the room went from being a chamber where a queen fed to being a room where two people who had been alone for a long time were no longer alone. When she was done, she did not let go. She stayed at my throat, her mouth there, her hand gone up into my hair. The fire ticked. The curtain moved in the draft, and the firelight moved with it, and her breath was warm against the wound she had just made. She lifted her head. She looked at me. She did not say anything. I did not say anything. Then she pulled me down with her into the bed. I want to be careful about what I say next. There are things between two people that the room is not entitled to. The cup left on the table all night. The robe pooled on the floor. The way a body that has spent a year refusing to want anything finds out that it still can. The way her hand closed at my shoulder when I was careful, and opened again when I was not. The way her mouth came back to my throat afterward, when the wound was already closing, and stayed there a long time. Not feeding, only there. I did not sleep. She did. She slept against me with her hair on my collarbone and her hands spread on my chest, and her blood, my blood, drying at her mouth, and I lay awake watching the curtain move and thinking that if this was all I was allowed to have, then let it ruin me slowly. The nights after that ran together. Some she only drank and was quiet. Some she only held me. Some we did not speak, and the not speaking was its own conversation. I slept with my wrist exposed, then my throat, then with no pretense at all. The cook stopped putting the bandages out in a basket and started leaving them folded on the table. She still did not say anything. She left an extra slice of bread sometimes, with butter on it. She had been here longer than the Queen. She had been here longer than me. The court said the Queen was recovered. The court did not know who the Queen had recovered on. There was a night near the end of that stretch when I lay awake against her, and I looked across the room at the writing desk, at Tomas's reading glasses where he had left them. I had not looked at them in months. They had not moved. The cup beside them had not moved. The chair was still pulled back. I understood that the chamber was not mine. It had never been mine. It had been his, and it had stayed his, and she had let me into it the way you let a guest into a house you do not live in anymore. She turned in her sleep. Her hand moved on my chest. Her cheek was warm against my collarbone. I did not stop watching the desk. I remembered things, those weeks. I remembered the men who had taken me for my mother. I remembered the language they spoke, which I had not heard in 26 years and which I would not hear again until the night Iva died on the courtyard stones. I remembered the king's men killing them. I remembered the king lifting me onto a horse and saying something I could not understand, and learning later that what he had said was, "You are safe, child. You are safe. You are safe." I remembered the year I was taught the kingdom's tongue. I remembered being told, after the cellar, that I would never speak of what I had seen, that I would speak only this kingdom's language from now on, that I would make myself useful and silent both. I lay beside her in the dark, and I let it sit. I saw her in the garden with Louis on the 23rd night. I had not been called yet that day. I was crossing the upper gallery, and I looked down through the arrow slit, and there she was on the gravel path with the boy. He was 6. He had Tomas's mouth. He held the cup. There was a cup. He had been drinking water, the way Tomas had held a cup. He watched the garden before he stepped into it the way Tomas had watched a room before entering. He was the small living echo of a man who had gone, and Ileana had her hand on his head, and her hand was, gentle is the wrong word. Her hand was careful. Her hand was the way you touch something you have promised to keep alive. I watched them for a long time. I went back to the kitchen and sat on the flour sack and did not move for an hour. The cook, eventually, said,
You should eat.
Yes.
I did not eat. She was lasting for the boy. The love-making was real. The need was real. The tenderness, in whatever way she had it, was real. But there was no future at the end of it. There was a kingdom being seated. There was a woman who had decided a long time ago to leave, using the time my blood gave her to leave well. I went up to her chambers that night when she called. I did not let her see. I do not think I let her see. I cannot be sure. I sang the foreign song that night while she lay against me afterward. I sang it through twice, very low, into her hair. She did not answer the line. She was awake. She was not asleep. I knew the difference now. She did not answer the line. I went down to my room before dawn. I left the wooden bird on the small table beside her bed because I had taken it out with the rest of my pockets when she pulled me down, and I did not pick it up before I went. In the morning, the cook brought it down to me, wordless. She set it on the kitchen table beside the loaf and went back to the dough.
She had 2 windows in her chambers. One faced the inner garden, the other faced the east. She lay awake beside Wren. He slept against her shoulder, bitten, exhausted, trusting her in a way he should not. His mouth was open slightly. The wound on his throat was already closing. He healed faster than he should, fed on the way he had been fed on, as if her blood had taught his body how to keep itself. She looked at him for a long time. He resembled the wooden bird too perfectly. She had only just understood that. The bird was a hawk Thomas had carved on a good day, and she had refused it because she could not bear to be given a thing made by his shaking hand. A hawk is not a songbird, she had said, and Thomas had turned and put the bird into the only other hand in the room. Thomas had understood the people in his rooms before she did. He had understood that the boy in the doorway was not a witness. The boy was a man who had been waiting 20 years to be looked at. Thomas had handed him the bird because Thomas had seen. She had not seen until tonight. She had ordered his legs broken when she was 15 years old. She had said the words herself. She had said, "From here on out, you work for this kingdom. You shall speak this kingdom's tongue and make yourself useful. You do not speak to anyone about what you witnessed, else you will live with all 4 limbs broken and still alive." She had said it in a voice she had not known she had. She had been a child. She had been the thing in the cellar. She had been her father's daughter trying to keep her father's daughter alive. She did not regret the order. Not exactly. The order had kept Ren in the world. Without the order, he would have been killed in the corridor while the king looked the other way. But she regretted that she had not understood, at the time, that the boy whose legs she ordered broken was a boy. With a name. With a song he sang in a language she did not know. With hands that would later carry a wooden bird through 20 years of his life because a dying man had once put it into them. She closed her eyes. He had loved her. She had let him. She had wanted to love him back. She had wanted to, in the way a starving thing wants food it cannot keep down. She had not. She had been buying him time. That was what it had been. Not love, not the thing he thought it was. She had let him love her because keeping him close kept him alive longer than he would have stayed otherwise. He would not have stayed otherwise. He was a man who would have gone out of the world the moment the kingdom no longer needed him in bells. She had needed him in bells. She had needed him out of bells. She had needed him. That was the problem. She had decided already to die after Louis was seated. She had been clear with herself about it for months. The plan was good. It was clean. It would cost no one but her. It would cost him. If she kept calling him, it would cost him. He would give until his body gave. He would give past that. He would give the way he had given the night he cut his own palm above her mouth, because he did not know any other way to give. She could not let him. She would not let him. The way to keep him alive was to stop calling him. She turned her face toward the window. She made the decision at the 3rd hour after midnight, with his mouth slightly open against her shoulder and his blood drying at hers. Tomorrow she would not call. The night after that, she would not call. She would hold until Louis was old enough to stand. She would let Ren go before the leaving could take him with her. She lay there until dawn. She did not move her hand from his hair.
I waited at the kitchen the next night. She did not call. I waited at the kitchen the next. She did not call. The cook did not look up. The cook had her hands in dough. The cook had been here longer than anyone in the world, I think. I took the bells out of my pocket. I put them on the table. I picked them up. I put them in my pocket. I took them out again. I set them on the table. I sat there for a long time. She did not call on the 4th night. She did not call on the 5th. By the 7th, I had stopped going up to the kitchen at the 8th hour, because waiting was worse than not waiting. By the 2nd week, I was back in costume. I saw her once in that 2nd week. She was walking with Louis in the courtyard. The boy had a stick, and he was trailing it along the gravel, and she was watching the ground and not him, and her hand was at the small of his back, lightly, the way you keep a child near you without seeming to. She did not look up. I do not know if she knew I was at the gallery window. I think she knew. I went back inside. I sat on the flour sack. I put on the bells. By the 3rd week I understood that the world was returning to its rightful shape. Tomas still haunted the palace. Tomas still had a place there. Tomas's nephew would have the throne, and Tomas's wife would walk with him in the courtyard until she did not, and Tomas's reading glasses would stay on the desk where he had left them. There was a great hall coming, the autumn court, full attendance, signed decrees. Vale would be there. Men like Vale never go. They only wait. I went to my small room beside the kitchens that afternoon. I painted my face. I put on the bells. I went into the great hall. There are 200 people in this room tonight, and only one of them knows I am singing about her. You know this part. You have been watching it from the beginning. She's on the dais, signing decrees. Her hand is steady. Her hand is the kind of steady that means she has eaten somewhere I was not invited to know about. And now we both know what that means. And now we both know who she has not been calling for. And now you understand why she will not look at me. My thumb finds the notch under the wooden bird in my pocket. I sing. I want her to flinch. I want her to break the line of the decree. I want her to do anything. She gives me nothing. Her hand stops on the line for 1/2 of one heartbeat. Then her hand moves again. She looks at me the way someone looks at furniture that has started to creak. Something in me that had been holding for a long time gives way. She has chosen. I do not know yet what she has chosen. Exactly. I will not understand it exactly before I die. I only know it the way a body knows a thing it cannot yet name. The way it knew, in the cellar when I was 9, that the men in the cart were not going to sell me cleanly. The way it knew, on a marble floor at 15, that the queen kneeling beside me was saving my life and ending it in the same breath. I almost laugh. I do not laugh. I finish the song. She does not look up. I bow. The court applauds, mildly. I leave the great hall in bells. In the corridor, I take them off and carry them in my hand. I do not put them back on. Chapter 6. Bells woke me before dawn. Not mine. Mine were on the floor by the bed, where I had set them down the night of the public song and not picked up since. These were the alarm bells, the ones in the high tower, the ones I had not heard since I was a child. They rang twice when there was a fire, 3 times when there was a death in the family, 5 times when there was war in the keep itself. They rang 5 times. I sat up. There was steel in the corridor. I could hear it through the wall. Steel and shouting in a language that was the kingdom's tongue spoken by men who had not learned it from kingdom mothers. Foreign weapons, old vampire hunting chains. I did not put on my paint. I did not put on the bells. I did not have time. I took the cane from beside the bed. I took the wooden bird from the shelf where I had set it the night before, when I had emptied my pockets for sleep, and I do not know why I did this. I have asked myself 100 times since. I set it back on the shelf. I think I thought I would come back for it. I went out in my sleep tunic. The servants' passages were where I had always known them. I went through. I went past 2 men in the wrong colors, and they did not see me. I tripped a third with the cane, and he went down hard against the stone. I knew the keep the way only a child raised in its passages knows it. I knew which stones turned. I knew which doors did not lock. I knew the 3 ways from the kitchens to the great hall and the 4 ways to the throne room. I was halfway through the long corridor under the east tower when a man stepped out of an alcove and put a sword in my stomach. He did not say anything. I did not say anything. He pulled the sword out and went past me toward the south wing. The cane was still in my left hand. I tried to take a step with it. The leg I leaned on did not hold the way it had held a moment before. The cane went down with me to the stone, and when I got back to my feet, I left it there, because I no longer had the grip for it. I started walking. The blood was warm, warmer than I expected. It went down my leg and into my shoe, and the shoe began to feel strange, and I thought, one of my shoes has always felt strange. This is only the other one catching up. I came into the kitchen through the back stair. The cook was there. She was alone. The fire was still banked from the night before. The bread had not been started. The alarm had come too early. She turned when I came in, and she looked at my hand at my belly and at the blood at the hem of my tunic. She did not say anything. She crossed to the side table where she kept the flour cloths, and she pulled one off the stack, and she folded it once, and she came back to me, and she pressed it into my hand against my belly. She closed my hand over the cloth. She held my hand there for a moment with both of hers. She had known about all of it. About the bells, about the queen, about the chambers, about the 11 nights in the 18th night, about the wooden bird, about every morning I'd come down to her kitchen with a bandage I did not want her to see. She let go of my hand. I went out through the back of the kitchen and up the small stairs toward the throne room. The throne room doors were open. She was inside. She was no longer starving. She had taken her crown off. It was on the floor, and she had taken the formal coat off too. She was in the plum robe. She was barefoot. There was a man at her feet, and the man was Vale's commander by the device on his shoulder, and he was not moving anymore. There was blood on her mouth and on her hands and on the front of the robe, and the blood was not hers. She was the queen the court had spent 20 years afraid she would become. She was magnificent. She threw the man aside. She turned. She saw me. For the first time since the great hall, her face broke. I started across the marble. I left a long trail. I could feel the cloth at my belly going through. I could feel the floor cold under my one bare foot. At some point I had lost a shoe. I do not remember when. I could feel the wooden bird that was not in my pocket because I had set it on the shelf, and I missed it. I missed it the way you miss a hand. She came to meet me. She caught me before I went down. Her arm went under my shoulders. Her other hand went to my face. Her hand was bloody and my face was not, and the blood went onto my cheek, and I did not mind it. I lifted my hand. It was heavy. I put my palm against her cheek. My blood smeared across her skin.
I'm glad you're alive.
It was the truest thing I'd ever said. I closed my eyes.
Epilogue. By daylight, the rebellion was broken. Vale was dead. The Sarnath ships were turned back at the harbor. Louis was brought up from the safe room in the cellars, and someone had given the boy bread, and he was holding the bread with both hands the way Tomas had held a cup. Ileana asked for Ren's body. No one could find it. He had gone to her in a sleep tunic. He had gone to her without bells. He had gone to her without paint. He had gone to her without the cane. There was nothing on his person to mark him as belonging to the keep. He had been mistaken, the captain said apologetically, for one of theirs. He had been burned with the rebel dead before noon. Never mind. She did not mean it. She went down to his small room beside the kitchens that evening. It was a narrow room. The bed was unmade. There was a basin and a pitcher. There were 3 shirts on a peg. There was a small shelf above the bed. On the shelf was the wooden bird. She picked it up. Tomas had carved it on a good day, 20 years ago, the year his hands had begun to shake. There was a small, uneven cut on the underside where the blade had slipped. She had not noticed it in 20 years. She had refused the bird and had not held it long enough to notice. She remembered telling Tomas that a hawk was not a songbird. She had been wrong about that. She had been wrong about almost everything in that room. She sat on his narrow bed with the bird in her hand, and the truth came in slowly, the way the worst truths come. He had loved her. She had let him. She had let him because he had been the last person in the country who remembered her father's face, because he had been the last person who had seen her sit beside Toms at supper, because he had been the only witness left of the woman she had been, when she could still pretend to be one. She had wanted to love him back. She had wanted to in the way a starving thing wants food it cannot keep down. She had not. She wondered, sitting there on his narrow bed, whether he would have come for her anyway, if she had told him, if she had said it plainly, if she had said, "I do not love you. I will not love you. I am leaving as soon as the boy can stand." Would he have come for her down the long corridor in his sleep tunic with a sword wound in his belly? She thought he would have. She thought he would have come for her exactly the same. That was the worst thing she ever learned about him. She closed her hand around the bird. The statue is in the private garden. It is small, stone. It is a songbird wearing a jester's hat. It is far enough from the main path that no one understands it. It is close enough to the path she walks every evening that she always sees it. She stops by it sometimes. She rests her hand on its stone head. She lifts her hand. She walks on. In her chambers, on the writing desk, Tomas's reading glasses still sit where he left them. Beside them, the wooden bird.